Hey, what's up, people? First of all, let me start off by telling you that if my voice sounds extra weird today, it's because I've been fighting off something in my throat for the past several days, and I even lost my voice for a couple days, but it's mostly back, so hopefully I can make it through this with no major issues. And also because of that, this video is going to be a bit different than usual. I've pretty much already done all the work. I'm just going to explain what I found and what I'm going to do about it, so there's really no exploration needed. And with all that, this is a Corsair HS80 headset that also happens to belong to my brother that I fixed the keyboard for a few videos back. If you happen to have watched that video, he told me that the microphone suddenly stopped working. The microphone on this headset is on a boom that can pivot up and down to turn the microphone on and off. And I immediately suspected that the wires inside would probably be damaged. But I decided to check the internets first to see if there was any talk of what an issue could possibly be. And most of the stuff that I found was talking about making sure that the microphone was selected properly in Windows settings, making sure that it wasn't muted, blah, blah, blah.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
And stuff like that. But I was pretty sure that that wasn't the issue when I tried it for myself. So I opened up the side with the microphone. And if you're wondering how this headset comes apart, you have to twist the ear pad counterclockwise on the left side or clockwise on the right side, and it will expose the screws. And once those screws are removed, then we have access to the stuff inside by removing this entire assembly with the speaker on it. And I've already desoldered the wires going to the speaker just to make it easier on me, so this thing's not flapping around in the breeze and all that, so I can set that aside. And since I suspected that the wires coming from the boom were probably damaged, the first thing I did was I tried replacing the wires that went to the microphone, and I replaced them with a separate little microphone that I pulled out of my bins of stuff. And that way I could see if the audio would respond whenever, I would try to test it out. And sure enough, it did. So the issue is definitely hardware and not software. Okay, so I had to figure out a way to remove the boom to see if there was any way I could fix it. But unfortunately, due to the way that it's constructed, it wasn't possible to remove it without the process being destructive. And there is a screw that holds the boom to the part where it pivots. But no matter how much I tried to back it out, it would just spin in place. And it felt like something was grinding in there. I even tried prying upwards while turning the screw. And that didn't work. So I ended up just prying the part off of the screw. And then I was able to pull the boom completely off. And we can see underneath it why it felt like it was grinding. There's a metal cup that's got sort of a radioactive symbol design on it that's supposed to fit into the boom. But that part was still on the rest of the pivot assembly. And the reason the screw wouldn't come out is because it was adhered with thread lock. I had to hold the cup part with some forceps while I tried backing the screw out. And finally, I was able to release it. The part that the boom pivots on is composed of a cup and a threaded piece with an O-ring that rides inside of the rest of the assembly, and it provides some friction so that the boom stays at the angle you place it in. And there's also a small metal plate with a bump on it that functions as a detent. There's a little bump in the plastic at that little spot right there. And so what that does is that as you tilt the microphone upwards, it will stop right at that side of the bump just before it hits a switch that's actually mounted on the USB board. That would be in that spot right there. So as you're tilting it back, that little bump will stop the whole boom assembly from tripping the switch. And then as soon as you go over that bump and it snaps into place on the other side, then it's already triggered the microphone. And this is what turns the microphone off when you tilt it upwards. I wanted to test the wiring from the microphone end to the end where the wires solder onto the board. And the two wires that are used for the microphone are this plain copper colored one and this white one. Unfortunately, I was not able to take the microphone end apart without the damaging the assembly, which caused one of the wires to break. And I wanted to show that at least the wires in the cable leading to and from the microphone were damaged, but it didn't matter too much. You may have noticed that there's a total of 7 wires. 2 go to the microphone, and then the other 5 go to an RGB W LED on the microphone end. And I asked my brother if he cared much for the LEDs, and he said he didn't even realize it had any. They probably just weren't working at all. And I can quickly demo to you that these wires are broken. I've attached this clip going to my multimeter to the red wire. And then on the other side, I'm going to touch this probe to where the red wire attaches to the board with the RGB LEDs. And as you can see at the moment, we have, well, if I could get it to stay on there. There we go. We have no continuity. But if I take this side and I sort of twist it and turn it where it comes out of the boom. Oh, I just realized I've got the black one going to the multimeter, not the red one. So just gonna switch that really quick. Okay, now we got the right wire going to the clip. So I'm gonna attach this one to the red one again. And I'm gonna twist on this end. Okay, I can't get that red one to make contact at all anymore. So let's try the white one. The white one is one of the ones that went to directly to the microphone. So with that one, if I start bending this area, there it is. So you can see how if I bend it at certain angles, it will make contact, but it loses it. So yeah, these wires are definitely broken internally. So unfortunately, due to the way that this is designed, the wire makes a really sharp bend at where the cable comes out of the boom. So it's pretty much only a matter of time before the wire starts breaking internally. And as you can see, like when it's inside of there, it would pivot something like this. And so as you can see, it bends a lot in that area. Inside of this cap at the end, that's where the microphone actually is. And this was kind of a pain to remove. I ended up having to cut this casing. There it is. There's a little microphone cartridge. And the cartridge itself is encased inside of this rubber boot. So we have it all taken apart and we know what the problem is. And at this point, this boom is pretty damaged and there's no way to easily replace the wiring in it. So what are we going to do about it?
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Well, what I ended up doing is taking a bunch of measurements and writing them down with all my chicken scratch on this Post-it. And I ended up designing some parts that I could print to replace the original stuff. It took me a couple tries to get everything just right, but this is what I ended up with. Now, the main reason it's in several parts is because I was pretty much just winging it as I went while I tried to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. And also, the original boom is flexible and it'll kind of like stay where you put it, like that. So I wanted something that could also bend a bit to provide some flexibility, but rigid piece of plastic just wasn't really going to work. So what I did is I ended up going with some brass tubing, but this would look kind of funky just on its own, being, sort of like gold colored. So what I'm going to do for this piece of tubing is that I'm actually going to wrap it with some heat shrink, this white piece of heat shrink. And as you can see, it's a little bit longer than the actual piece of tubing itself. But I did that on purpose because what I'm going to do is once the heat shrink is shrunk to the tubing, I'm going to tuck the end of the heat shrink into the tubing. So that way it kind of provides a little bit of protection so that wires that I run through this now don't like rub against the metal. And I cut it on this end using a small tubing cutter. And actually I bought this piece of, it's just a brass tubing stock. So those are the measurements. I reamed the end that I cut with a blade, like a brand new sharp blade, just so I could remove some of the material, but I didn't want to expand the end too much because I designed the holes that this assembly with the heat shrink is going to fit into so that it's really, really snug up against the heat shrink. And I am going to glue it in place, but I wanted the fit to be pretty snug to begin with. So once everything is all assembled and I have the heat shrink on there, that's kind of what that's going to look like. This is actually going to like fit all the way down onto that piece, just like so. So I tried to make it so that the entire length of the new boom is identical to the original length of the original boom. Oh, and I asked my brother if he even cared for the RGB LED. He said like no. So that eliminates 5 wires that we don't have to run through this new piece. And speaking of wires, I was going to need something that was going to be somewhat flexible and thin enough to fit through this entire assembly. And so I found this piece of wire in my junk wires, one of my junk wire drawers. And this was from some headphones. It looks like it was actually a Sony headphone. I just noticed that. So it's got 3 conductors. I really only need 2, but I found that this entire cable will actually fit into the small galley that I designed into the pivoting piece that's going to go inside the headset. And you can kind of see in there, because I used some sort of like natural translucent PLA, that the cable is going to go inside of that galley. It's going to come out that way and out of that hole. And the reason why I made that hole the way that I did is because actually I had already designed another one. You can see this one has an opening that comes out. Well, when I designed it, I didn't realize that the switch to turn off the microphone needs to glide along the middle part of this piece when it gets activated. So it goes something like that, so that as it goes up, it'll kind of like stop right there. Well, on this piece, if we take a look, it goes and then it drops into that hole, and then it can keep going. But if you try to go the other way, it gets stuck on that little lever for the switch. So this wasn't going to work. I had to redesign it. So this one is the final form of the part. And so this one actually fits and seems to work pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. You can see on this new part where I've designed sort of a radioactive symbol looking thing or a little pocket into the piece. And so that's where this piece, this little cup, actually fits into. And it actually fits pretty well. It fits really snug in there. It's a little difficult to put on, oh, there we go. I got it on there. So that's, it actually has like a flat little facet on there that fits onto the other threaded piece inside of the rest of the headset. So this actually came out really nice, and it seems it's going to work pretty well. The holes on the end of the microphone, or the little cover, they didn't print out very well, but I was able to clean them up by just taking like a really, really tiny drill bit and just sort of going in there and cleaning them up and making it so that they were all like nice and opened up. And I designed this to be very identical to the original part, minus all the extra like fake holes that were designed into the original plastic. I mean, they're totally useless. So like, why would I want to do that? So I just designed the holes so that it at least looks pretty much similar to what it did originally. So at this point, really all I need to do is just assemble everything, run the wire through, and test it out and make sure that it works. So I'll just kind of run through and do that really fast. All right, this didn't quite work as well as I wanted it to. On the side where I had a sort of where I cut it and I reamed it a little bit, I guess it was still a little too sharp. It ended up cutting the heat shrink, but it's not that big of a deal. And the ends of the tubing I am going to insert into these sleeves, and I'm just going to adhere them with some CA. I think that's a little too much. There you go, that's a little better. So I'm going to try to do this quick because it's probably going to adhere really fast. That didn't completely work out. It bunched up. Okay, change of plans. That didn't quite work out. So I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to cut the end off. And I'll just try adhering the metal into the sleeve. Okay, that feels pretty strong, so I think that's actually going to work out pretty well. So I think I'm going to do the same thing on this side, because otherwise the heat shrink is just going to get all scrunched up, just like it did on this side. And that's going to look ugly. So yeah, this will work. I mean, it's not like there's going to be any pulling or anything done on this. It's just going to get like swung up and down. Okay, and I've tried to make sure that both of these are parallel by pushing them both down so that the tube can like rotate, So that feels pretty good. I think that's going to work out pretty good. So Just going to let that cure for a bit. Make sure that it's nice and secure. And then I'll try to run the wiring through from this side to the other. Get the wiring to go through the pivoting part. And then I can glue this piece to that. And that part of the assembly should be done. I just need to worry about putting the wires onto the microphone. Oh, and also on the microphone end where the cartridge is, I'm got a piece of foam. It's about like a 1/4 inch thick piece of foam. I punched a hole in the middle, or not quite in the middle, but as you can see, there's a hole there. So this is actually going to encase the cartridge with the boot, and I'm going to use this to push it all the way down to the end so that it sits right around there. And then once all that's assembled, then I can put this onto the end of that part, and the boom should be fully assembled. There we go. I twisted it together a bit just to keep everything from splaying outwards. So even with the jacket, this fits in there like it's got plenty of room to spare. And then I made the gallery inside so that it curves and then it comes out the end. So it's nice and it's really easy to just push it through. And as you can see, it already came out the other end, even though it's not like fully open. But there we go. So now I just have to pull some of this through. You can see the cable making the turn inside. And that should be more than enough cable for this purpose. I'm going to pull a little bit more just in case. Okay, so I can glue these two pieces together. I'm going to try to not glue the jacket of the wire, so I'm just going to try to do some adhesive like on the ends. Oh, well, if I glue the jacket of the wiring inside, I can just tuck some of the wire into the shell that the microphone fits into, so it's not a big deal. Okay, that feels pretty secure. So on this end, it's going to fit up to that point. So I don't need a ton of wire, but like I said, I can tuck some inside. So I'll maybe snip it right around there. And then I'm just going to score the jacket a little bit. I don't want to cut through the wires. There we go. That was a little more work than I expected, but got them. So since I only want to keep two, I guess I'll snip off this green one, then I can use the copper one as the ground, and I can use the red one as the signal from the microphone, and then I'll just do the same on the other end. Oh, and actually, I just realized that this is loose enough where I can actually just pull the cable through back this way, so I don't even need to worry about tucking a lot of wire into the shell casing. So, and actually, that allows me to just pull this green one out since I said I'm not going to use it. And there we go. Now I just have two wires. And because this stuff is so thin, I should be able to easily tin it without having to like scratch it up or anything. Yeah, there it is. And I still need to remove the old material from the microphone. And I just put a tiny bit of flux on there, and I'm just going to use the residual solder to adhere these. It's not like they need a ton of solder or anything. And that's positive. Now, before I go too far, I should probably make sure that I have continuity from one side to the other, because I just took this wiring out of my junk stuff with the assumption that it was okay, but I don't know if there's a break inside or anything like that. So let's just double check. So I'm going to touch the red side and then touch the red side on this side. And yeah, there we go. No, that's fine. Okay, let's check the ground side. And there we go. So yeah, this is good. Okay, since all that checks out, I'm going to finish reassembling the rest of the microphone end. And I wanted to get this boot to go in from the top side because it's got that small notch. So I want that to be on this side, but I want the wires to be on the back side. So I'm just going to feed the microphone through the foam. Then I'm going to put this boot back on. Okay, so that's how that looks. And then I can stuff all this into this shell. There we go. So now the microphone's in the vicinity of the holes. And this foam will keep it nice and cushioned. Now I can pull the wiring back a bit and leave a little bit of slack, just like that. And then this piece fits onto this tight enough that I'm not going to use adhesive for this part. And because I also printed it with the rings both sort of like in this direction, this actually meshes in pretty tightly like that. So, yep, that's not going anywhere. Sweet, that's looking pretty much done. I probably should have used white for this so that it sort of matches the rest of the headset. But, I mean, we're going for functionality more than anything, so I'm not too worried about the coloring on it. And I scored and pulled off the rest of the sheathing from the remaining wires, so I can reassemble this now into the rest of the headset. And I'm going to position these so that it kind of matches what I have on there. So, turn this a little bit this way maybe. That. So this has to be sort of like tilted, a little bit of an angle like that. And then I'm going to try to get those parts to mesh together. There we go. I think it's on. So I'm going to put the screw on that. And I'm not going to put any thread locker or anything on this. I think just snugging it down should be more than enough. I mean, it's not like this thing's taking a lot of abuse or anything. And I probably should have made sure these wires were underneath before I did anything. Whoops. There's a notch right there that you can see. That's where the original wires ran through, and it was actually glued into place. I don't know if I want to glue this into place. I want it to be as free as it can be so that hopefully the wires don't break anytime soon. With this design, I have a feeling these are eventually going to fail also. I don't know how long that's going to be. I guess we'll find out. But this is almost completely assembled. I need to put in that little plate for the detent into that slot. And then I got to put the screw for that on. So that just has a tiny little screw that I made a hole for. There we go. It just needs to be snugged down. See how much wire I need for it to be fully open like that. So it needs about that much wiring. I'm just going to tuck a little bit more in there than it needs. Okay, so I'm not going to use glue, but I'm going to stuff a small piece of foam into that slot to hold those wires and see how that holds up. I don't know if it's going to interfere with this thing swinging down. Yeah, a bit. Well, I can cut it down a little bit smaller. About that. Well, that's better. It clears now. So, there we go. That should be enough wire. Okay, and before I do much else, I'm going to put a small amount of grease just where that detent rides so it doesn't wear down this plastic too fast. All right, now I just need to remove the microphone that I used to test this with and put on the new wires. So just going to melt those right off. Put a little bit of flux on there just for good luck. That doesn't look very neat. It kind of frayed on me a little bit, but it doesn't look like it's touching the ground, so it should be okay. And there's the ground. Okay, so I tucked the rest of the wiring that was left over down underneath that little pocket. That's below where this little board with the USB-C connector and the switch is. And as we can see, as we tilt the microphone upwards, that little detent stops it right at that point. Right there, just before it hits the little actuator on the switch. So as we overcome the bump right there, we can see that the switch is triggered. So at this point, the microphone should be off if everything is working correctly. And so I think this is going to work pretty well. So now I just need to plug in the receiver for this headset into my computer. I'm going to pull up the audio properties. We'll go to the microphone and we'll make sure that the microphone is actually working. Okay, so I've got the input settings up there on the top left. As you can see, it says headset microphone Corsair HS80. And right now I haven't turned the headset on just yet, so I have to hold this button down. And we're going to see this LED blink. There it goes. So it's blinking green, so that means that the headset is on now. If I tap on that, we shouldn't get anything under where it says test your microphone. So I'm going to tilt the microphone down, which should turn it on. And then when I tap on it, we should see this moving. So here we go. I'm going to tilt it down right there. It should be on. And as we can see, it's already responding. So this is working. And now it's back off. and back on. So, yep, this is going to work pretty well. Okay, so the only thing left to do is to put the rest of the headset back together. I got to solder these wires back onto the speaker, put the earpads back on, and that's it. And these, the earpads are kind of coming apart. So before I put them back together, I'll try to put like a little thin layer of CA, like around where they need to be glued back on. You can see that one also needs some work there. And hopefully that'll work. Let's see. I'm going to speed through this part, but let's see if that works. That's not too bad. I think maybe contact cement would have been a better option for this, but this actually worked out pretty well. So I'm just going to do the same to this one. All right, and there we go. It really does not look bad at all. I thought that maybe this would be like a little bit more of an eyesore, but in my opinion, it doesn't look too bad. And I mean, it works. So that's pretty much all we wanted. And I'm pretty sure my brother will be happy with this. I mean, he better be happy with this. It's not like I'm charging him. Doing it for free, dang it. So there we go. That's going to do it for this one. So if you made it to the end, thank you all for watching once again. I will see you guys around the bench.